I think leadership is really simpler than people want to make it. Leadership is about setting a vision, getting people behind it. And the biggest mistakes I see from leaders is when they get that part right and then they try and do everything themselves. Okay, we just forgot what leadership is. Leadership is getting others to get behind your vision, and maybe it's a vision they helped create, and pulling together to get a mission accomplished.
Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in the state. Today, I'm joined by Bob Hicks, the chairman and managing partner of the law firm Taft, one of the largest firms in Indiana and in the country. Bob grew up in Indianapolis and graduated from Butler University with a degree in business and accounting and a minor in journalism. He went to law school at William & Mary and started his career with Arthur Anderson as a tax accountant. But a legal career beckoned, and he joined the firm Summer & Barnard, an old name in Indianapolis legal circles that disappeared when the firm merged with Taft back in 2008. Bob's practice is focused on complex business and commercial matters, including venture capital transactions, mergers and acquisitions, structured financing, and business advisory services. Bob took a hiatus from the practice of law to help lead CIT Group, where he was one of the principal deal makers and senior executives responsible for more than $25 billion in acquisitions, debt financings, asset-based securitizations, where he worked in Chicago, Toronto, and New York. He also managed a venture capital and private equity portfolio of approximately $100 million for CIT Group, and ultimately led its largest portfolio company, RealMed Corporation, an Indianapolis-based provider of healthcare software. Since 2017, Bob has been Taft's chairman and managing partner, and has been leading the growth of the firm, including mergers in Minneapolis, Detroit, and most recently, Taft's merger with Denver-based Sherman & Howard, whose 8 offices and 125 lawyers will join Taft on January 1st of next year. Bob's list of accolades as a lawyer is a mile long, but Taft's culture is also important to Bob. Giving back, either through the support of charities or pro bono work, is a big part of Taft's culture, and Bob has been involved over the years as a board member for Carmel's Center for the Performing Arts and as a member of the President's Roundtable for the United Way of Central Indiana. Here's our conversation. Bob, welcome to Off the Record podcast. Thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Nate. It's great to be here.
Well, I can't wait to talk about Taft's growth and all that's happened since you've been chairman and managing partner of the firm. But before we go down that road, let's talk a bit about your path to becoming a leader of one of the largest law firms. And that path included a first job that we share in common, which is a paperboy.
What a great job. I mean, probably taught me more about being a partner in a law firm than anything else I've ever done. You probably feel the same way.
Teaches a little bit about accountability and showing up every day and responsibility. Right?
Getting out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, waiting for the papers to get there, knowing you have to do it by 6 o'clock. And if you don't, you're going to have a pink slip complaint from someone. And then if you have to collect, you had to collect your bill every week, pay your bill every week. And sometimes if I had a date, I had to go ask some wonderful, nice little lady to pay me 9 or 12 weeks in advance so that I could afford to take someone out on a date.
It does teach you accountability and knowing that you got a customer to serve, and
exactly.
those come in handy in any business for sure.
You learn about a service business.
That's right. So you go to Butler and you start out as a music and radio TV major before switching to accounting. That's a big difference between accounting and music, radio, and TV. Tell us about kind of that journey and how that occurred.
The first 2 majors sounded like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it's what I like doing. So started that way. And after about a year, I started thinking about that. I don't think I'm ever going to make money doing either of these things. It just felt like it. Long story short, my father was an accounting professor at Butler. And on a bet, he assumed I couldn't get an A in one of his classes. So I took his class, got an A in it. And he said double or nothing. And I never got another B. So it was kind of a cathartic event for me to switch. And accounting ended up being a very intellectually stimulating business. It may not sound that way, but it's very logical. It's very problem solving. It's got some math. Everybody thinks it's about math, but it's really about taking a set of facts and applying them to rules and reaching a conclusion, which is what law school really was. So it was a great pre-law as it turned out.
My CFO told me today that she had your dad at Butler as her accounting professor.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I run into people all the time that he's really influenced and had a big part of their accounting career. So it's fun to hear.
You joined Arthur Andersen while you're still in college, if I've got this right.
Correct.
And you take the CPA exam your senior year before you're getting ready to graduate. So you're working and you're taking the CPA exam while you're getting ready to graduate.
I figured it was the only chance I was ever going to have to take the exam because I was starting law school and I just knew myself well enough to think, well, if I end up being a lawyer, I'm not going to ever go back and take the exam. So I thought I'd never know it better than I do right now. Let's take it. And that's a situation. My father wouldn't speak to me for a month after that. He said, you know, you had to have flunked it. So why'd you even do it? Turned out I got lucky and passed it. And it was true. I never probably would have gone back and taken it. So it was good to do.
That's a pretty rare feat. I had a lot of friends who took the CPA exam shortly after college, and most of them didn't pass the whole exam. You passed sections.
Yeah, usually tried to pass two parts.
But you did it on the first try, which is awesome.
Kind of necessity is the mother of invention. I knew I had to pass it, or I was never going to take it again. So it was also fresh in my mind, So I think it helped.
So you decide to pivot to law. What point in your college career did you decide that you were going to go to law school?
That was also late game. I think about a year or two into the accounting major, I said, why not be a lawyer? My brother was out at William & Mary as having gone to Ernst & Young, then Ernst & Winnie. He had the same degree from Butler. He was out getting his law degree. And, I thought this pattern actually looks pretty good. And I decided to do the exact same thing. And my dad had gotten his law degree with an accounting degree. And so, you do play copycat a little bit, especially if you're not really sure what you want to do out of life. I just knew I liked the analytics of accounting. I liked tax. And I thought law school made sense.
So you're practicing law for about 10 years or so, and you decide to take a hiatus from the practice of law and go to work for a group called CIT. At that time was one of the largest publicly owned leasing companies
Correct.
In the country. Tell us about how that move came about.
I was in the middle of representing a company called Newcourt Credit Group out of Toronto, and they were buying Anthem Financial from Anthem right here in Indianapolis. So I became their primary outside counsel. And about 2 weeks into that transaction, the CEO and the president flew down to Indianapolis and offered me a job to be their, initially to be their U.S. general counsel, but to ultimately run their U.S. businesses, which was sort of a dream job, maybe a job of a lifetime for me. They doubled my salary. They gave me a bunch of equity. They said the only challenge is now you have to finish this deal. So we finished the deal. And they said the beauty is we're going to be headquartered right here in Indianapolis in the same building you're in. I thought, well, how great is this? I had a young family and I took the head fake. And literally 2 months later, after I had joined them in August of 96, they decided to move me to Toronto. So I don't know if they knew that when they offered me the job, but it didn't matter. I was all in at that point.
Yeah.
So then we just kept growing. I was employee about number 400. And 3 years later, we had 8,500 employees. So I'm sort of used to this torrid growth pace that you now see at Taft. But we were, it was a young company. It's called Newcourt. And then we then moved out to New Jersey when we bought AT&T Capital from AT&T. And then we ultimately merged into CIT Group. And then ultimately we were sold to Tyco. And I was a senior officer all the way through that at the table, and it was fun. And I learned a ton about business, and I learned about what not to do as a lawyer, and I saw everything. It was kind of a fun, I think every lawyer, if you could magically step out of your shoes for a little bit, go on the other side, and hear how silly some of us sound by always telling clients what they can't do or,
that's right.
all the downside, and they go, yeah, but I don't really care. I want to know what I can do. And that's what I learned.
Not many business lawyers, as you know, a fellow business lawyer, but not many get the opportunity to go and run a business, to be in the top executive, and then go back and practice law and have that vantage point. So that's an important distinguishing factor. I'm sure that's been helpful to you through the years. It has,
and I've seen it a few times. Normally it doesn't work because normally when you go into one of the in-house jobs, you stayed as a lawyer. So you didn't necessarily maybe have the same mindset as I developed over time. I really ultimately became head of corporate development, which is really a deal doer, head of their M&A, head of their joint ventures. And I had a business mindset about how to get deals done. It was just beat into my head because Wall Street forced that on us. Coming back with that mindset, I think, is helpful. But secondly, we rolled up our sleeves and worked the whole time I was at the other company. And many times people go in-house and they do it to lighten their load and maybe have a more predictable lifestyle. So coming back and being a partner in a law firm after that puts you back in the sort of the deep end of the pool as far as working hard and crazy hours. And so it doesn't always translate well. Mine seemed like a vacation when I left there and came back to practice law. It was not quite a vacation, but it was a little less of a load than I even had when I was at CIT.
So you were gone from City of Indianapolis for about 5 years or
I was gone for almost 6 years.
6 years. And did you know that you were going to come back to Indianapolis eventually, or was that a for sure? Or
so I kept my house here, which was a stabilizing factor in that decision. My heart was here. Indianapolis is where I grew up. My family was here. And so I kind of always knew I wanted to come back here. I never quite knew where the Wall Street thing was going to take me, though. You know, I would have gone where I needed to, but ultimately I figured I would be back here at some point.
So you come back to Summer & Barnard, which then merges with Taft in 2008, and you were managing partner at the time of the merger at Summer & Barnard, correct?
None of us wanted to be called managing partner. I think if you asked anybody who the managing partner was, it probably was me. Mostly because I was our main finance partner and I was sort of the strategic
You were the deal
thinker.
guy from CIT.
Correct.
Doing deals, yeah.
But none of us really wanted to call ourselves managing partner. There was a 3 or 4 person executive committee that we really decided things. And, you know, we got the consensus. When you're a small firm, you know, you really need to get the consensus of all your partners. And we were very much that way. So I would say I think most people would say I was the managing partner, even though I never had the title.
So in 2017 then, fast forward, Summer & Barnard merges with Taft. In 2017, you begin your service as the firm-wide managing partner of Taft. And as you kind of referenced earlier, since that time, Taft has really been on a growth tear. I know there were some acquisitions that occurred before you were there, but certainly since you've been there, the mergers with law firms has really continued. And now when you started, you had 400 lawyers. Fast forward 7-8 years now, and you've just passed the 1,000 attorney mark, and revenues are up over 400% over that period. Talk a little bit about Taft's growth strategy and why that kind of growth made a lot of sense for Taft and its clients.
Absolutely. So you got to go all the way back to the May 1 of 2008 when Summer Barnard merged with Taft. That was sort of the birth of modern Taft. We called it New Taft. We were about 1/3 of the firm. 2/3 of the firm was in Ohio. But we looked at it, on average, our partners were 13 years younger than the Taft partners. And we sort of became the start of the succession plan. And I got to hand it to the prior leadership of old Taft. They wanted to really get outside of Ohio and become a regionally dominant firm. And we knew that would take a while. We knew we had to get to Chicago. And there was a real push to be more than just a single city firm. There was a push to get bigger so you could build better practice groups. You couldn't just cast your net over one pond and get the talent you needed for each of your practice groups. A good example was Summer & Barnard was lucky to have 1 or 2 tax lawyers. And today, as Taft, with where we are, we have about 45 federal income tax lawyers. And it feeds on itself, but it's because we're in 9 or 10 markets with major offices, we're able to draw 4 or 5 of those in each market. And we couldn't take any one of our markets and build the kind of tax department we've been able to build. So that's why we started to do it in 2008. And we knew we couldn't stop. And we wanted a policy, which was the rule of reason, i.e. common sense on virtually everything. But also when we had ideas, let's take the best idea no matter where it came from. It didn't matter that there was a sort of at that time a headquarters and other people might have felt like satellites. We sort of rejected that whole concept as a condition of our merger. We were like, let's move to a headquarterless model. Let's go to wherever the best idea is generated wins. And let's quit worrying about who's in charge and just go win. And that's what we started to do. And it takes a while to get the momentum from that. We then did a Columbus merger. We did a Cleveland merger. We then did the Chicago merger, which put us on the map, in most people's eyes as being in Chicago. And then we did Minneapolis and we did Detroit. So when we go to a new market, we get the real advantage of having, just like with Summer Barnard, you get the business relationships, you get the leadership, you get the glue in the market, you get the really in-depth knowledge of how to be a lawyer in whatever state or city that's in. And then you've got to rely on that management team. And they want 2 things. They want to run their own market, but they also want a seat at the adult table on deciding where you're going as a firm. And we've had to embrace both of those. And it's really been cathartic to us to get the talent from those markets where nobody's a satellite. We're all in it together. And we just make better decisions that way. And it's really worked.
So you're over 1,000 attorneys now. What do you see over the next few years? What do you see as the Taft of 2030, for example?
Well, our goal, if you look at the top 25 law firms in the United States, they've done an incredible job of sort of dominating the crazy, expensive legal work out of Wall Street and, major markets. So their rates are at $2,500 to $3,000 an hour now for their top people. It's just kind of nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, what's happened here.
Yeah, it's true.
And the middle market, which is what we do, and we have the same academic credentials they do, et cetera. We just chose to live in our sort of home markets where, a Cincinnati or an Indianapolis or a Columbus, where you get that Midwestern culture and sensibility. But, our rates are only probably 30% of what like Kirkland & Ellis and Skadden Arps rates are. So there's been sort of a separation between that top 25 firms and the next ones. And you still have a lot of firms that are anywhere from 75 to 300 lawyers that are trying to figure out what they're going to do with their future. So what's happened is the super regionals have sort of built up, or the national versions of it. And we're one of those. There's probably 5 to 10 firms in the country like us that are trying to become dominant in the national market for our priced and value work. Cities like Indianapolis are not going to pay the $2,500 to $3,000 an hour rate. Eli Lilly may hire them, or Simon Properties may hire them for their Wall Street kind of work. We get that. But for the local work that's paid for by local business owners that are privately held and well capitalized, they're not interested in that. And so to build the best platform to serve those clients, that's what I call the middle market, which is probably 80% of our economy in the United States. They want to have a safe choice with all the resources they need, but people who are entrepreneurial focused, and they have the authority to really deal with them in their market. And so that's the model we've built. And it's not done being built yet. I mean, I think the next 20 years is probably going to turn us into a national version of ourselves. So what does that mean from a size and scale standpoint? We're a firm that's mostly large offices. So we'll probably continue that model in another 4 or 5 cities. And then we'll probably fill in where needed, where it's strategic. But we don't feel compelled to be in every market, in every town. We love cities like Indianapolis or Minneapolis or Cincinnati and Columbus because it fits us and it fits our clients. And so we'll keep doing that. That's why Denver and Phoenix fit so well. You'll see a Salt Lake City probably start to become very popular in the Mountain West for businesses that have the California flight. Denver's been a great recipient of that. So has Phoenix. So has Austin, Texas. So you look at cities like that and they fit us really well. We're also going to have to be in Florida. So I think over the next 15 to 20 years, you're going to see us probably turn into a firm that's twice what we are today, but be spread throughout the United States with a headquarterless model, kind of doing exactly what we're doing, but just doing more of it in more markets.
So you mentioned the word entrepreneurial, and in my observations, you as a leader over the last number of years have been very entrepreneurial. And I say that because in the Indianapolis market, for example, there hasn't been traditionally a lot of movement among firms, among lawyers. It's typical, as you know, in Chicago and New York, groups will pick up and move to another firm.
And people are writing big checks to move them.
They're writing big checks. Yeah. But I've noticed, paying attention to the legal market, that a lot of great legal talent has made their way to Taft over the last number of years. Tell us a little bit about that approach, and how does a group pick up from one firm and end up at Taft?
My view of entrepreneurialism is about calculated risk. I mean, it's never being complacent and letting good be the enemy of great. It's always thinking about the next evolution of yourself, right? I mean, entrepreneurs are always, every good entrepreneur you've ever, including yourself, every time you and I talk and have breakfast, it's like, well, now we're buying the Gary Dick show, and now we're going to expand to other markets, and this is what we're doing. And you're after the next. Your definition of mediocrity is probably mine, which is mediocrity is not doing better than I did last year. It's not a set thing. I think entrepreneurs think that way, and I think they feel like they've got to always be moving forward. And to do that, you have to take some risk, but not stupid risk. And so that's what I think we've done. We looked at it and said, law firms are a thing of the past in most people's mind. People aren't excited about the process of the legal process, a litigation and things that just take forever. And it just feels very cumbersome. So we changed the game and we said, let's not think of ourselves in the law business. Let's think of ourselves in the talent business. Because I know this, if I chase somebody's clients, I've got a 1 in 100 chance of even chipping away at their client base. It's a very loyal relationship generally. But if I hire the lawyer, their clients follow because the relationship is really with that team or those lawyers. So we knew that if we built a better platform, a better mousetrap, if you will, had the right culture, had good economics, and empowered people to run their own practices and to become leaders, that we would draw that talent, and with it would come their clients. And that's exactly what's happened. And so it's that positive look forward, let's take calculated risk and constantly reinvest in ourselves. We take 10% of our profits each year and reinvest in the growth of the firm. And what's happening now is our decisions from 2 and 3 years ago are producing profits today, and we're using those profits to keep growing. So this year we've hired, I think it's like 65 new lawyers this year outside of our mergers. And many of them are leaving other firms who are saying, my current firm doesn't have a strategic plan. They're not investing in us. They're just trying to maximize current profits. They haven't thought about AI. They're not doing what we do, where we have 50% of our leadership positions for women. We've invested in DEI. And those are the kind of things, when you're in the talent business, you think about. And when you're in the law business, all you're thinking about is moving the pot from the left side of the desk to the right side of the desk and solving business. We got to do that too, but we've got to do it in a way that's drawing the next talent to our firm. So that's kind of been our secret sauce.
Well, your deal-making experience from your CIT days, it feels like is certainly in development business, certainly coming into action.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think the best compliment I ever get, and I don't get that many of them. No, the best compliment I ever get is when somebody says, prove to me you have a law degree. And most lawyers would be insulted by that. I'm actually excited about it. I go, my client understands that I'm actually thinking like he is or she is, as opposed to sort of almost creating animosity, because most lawyers are in the risk prevention business.
That's right.
I'm in the risk management business. And so I think they understand that. But there's a lot of good business lawyers out there that actually do have that mindset. They don't maybe have my experience of having done it on the other side and come back. But I do think it is a mindset issue. It's not an intellect issue. There's a lot of smart lawyers, and it's just a question of how you focus your brain to say, is this mindset going to be solving their problem from a business perspective, or am I going to put myself in the box of just being a lawyer and telling them what the risk is and saying, now you decide?
Well, before we take a quick break, I want to ask you about the legal merger business. Our readers and our listeners constantly are hearing about law firms merging and so forth. What is the forces that are driving law firms to, like yours, to get bigger and to have more economies of scale? What are the forces within the law practice today?
So I think there's probably, if I could count them up, there's probably 3. Number one, I would say this: lawyers with big practices need a bigger platform to have the resources to serve all the needs of their clients. Somebody with a $10 million practice, I'll just make up a number here, they're probably not going to a small firm because they're worried they don't have a big enough IP group or a tax group, et cetera. So I think number one is, in the talent business, when you're looking for those kinds of practices, you need to provide them those resources. And there's only one way to do it. You have to have the scale to be able to draw from different markets, like I said. And then secondly, it creates a balance sheet for you to be able to invest in those resources. So that's sort of maybe first and foremost. To draw the kind of talent you want, you've got to get bigger to get the resources. Secondly, just focusing on the practice areas. There's just not enough legal talent in each of the markets that you could build a complete practice group that would serve the entire firm. So for example, even if I was in Chicago, there's plenty of tax lawyers there, but they're not all going to come to one firm. They're going to look at it and go, well, we'll spread around. So when I can build a department by having strategically placed markets where I can draw, again, 3 to 5 people in a market, they're a little nucleus, and then they cross over really well with the others. So building practice groups really almost required of necessity, both growth, but growth not all in one market. So that's the second. The third thing is the expensive resources like going to the cloud, investing in AI, investing in DEI, investing in the training and development of young associates today. It's different than when you were a young associate at one of your firms, or I was a young associate. Back then, it was throw you in the deep end of the pool and see who can swim. Today, associates want to have formal training programs. They want to have formal mentorship. They want to have a path to partnership or a path to moving forward. And they need what's called professional development groups. We invest in 5 different ex-lawyers that were associate deans in law schools and created a professional development group. Their sole job in life is to mentor, train, and help develop our young associates to become partners. And, our retention rate since we've done that has been enormous.
It was sink or swim, certainly.
Back in your day, mine did too.
For sure, yeah. Those are three interesting factors driving. So thanks for sharing those with us.
Sure.
Let's take a quick break.
Sure.
This is Off the Record Podcast. Let's take a quick break. This is Off the Record Podcast.
Get caught up on the state's top business news every business day with the Inside Indiana Business Radio On Demand podcast. Available now at InsideIndianaBusiness.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Off the Record Podcast. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, and I'm talking with Bob Hicks, Chairman and Managing Partner of the Taft Law Firm. Bob, I want to talk a little bit about your perspective when it comes to Indiana. And what I mean by that, you've got a pretty unique perch. You've got branches, offices, I should say, all over the country. Taft was initially formed as an Ohio firm, so you, of course, got major presence in Ohio, but you now have presence in Minnesota and Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, now out west in different locations. So you get to see a lot of different states and what each state is doing. From your perspective, how is Indiana doing comparatively? And you also get a sense from the legal business itself in terms of working with companies. How are we doing as a state compared to some of the other markets you operate in?
So I actually think that Indiana has a lot of really good things going for it. We have great people. I think we have a great moral compass as a culture here. I think people are generally, they have the Midwestern sensibility, and there's an integrity that's sort of pervasive in my mind. That's at least how I feel about it. I feel like our tax structure is reasonable. Of course, you now have 8 or 9 states in the country that have no taxes. I'm not really sure what all they're doing to replace it. You have to be careful when you look at somebody who has no income tax, say, well, how are they getting me? Or what else is going on? So there's more to it than that, right? But I think our tax structure is a reasonable one. Is it perfect? I'm not know if I'm smart enough to say that, but I think we run a very, very good balanced budget with we've built deficits. I go back to Mitch Daniels and subsequent, and lots of good governors we've had and good leaders. We've had good business leaders, certainly in central Indiana. I think the LEAP project we're doing is very interesting, and I'm excited to see it because I love seeing us investing in the future as opposed to old technologies. I think our education system here, certainly at the college level, is very strong. I think IU and Purdue are a tremendous asset to this state, along with their offshoot campuses like here in Indianapolis for both of them. So I think that's good. I think we have some of the same problems other communities have, though. Like I think our inner cities are an issue all over the country. I think we've developed almost a permanent underclass in the inner cities of our country that needs to be addressed. I mean, the educational systems, the amount, how they're funded, how they're structured and managed. I mean, every citizen of our country should have the same opportunity, and that's just not the case today. If you grow up a wealthy white kid in Hamilton County, you've probably got a 98% chance of success. And if you grow up in the inner city as a diverse child and you don't have the infrastructure around you, have a much lower percentage. And that's just not right. It's not morally right, and I think we need to fix it. That's not unique to Indiana. So I think we're also positioned well with the crossroads of I-70 and US 31 to be a great logistical hub. So I think I'm very bullish on Indiana. I look at our economy and I look at the ones in Ohio and I look at the ones like Minneapolis and I look at Chicago. They all have been doing well. I'm not sure all of them are quite as good a climate to do business in. Depends on some of the policies that are adopted in those states. I do love having a diversified network of those communities. So what's interesting is if we're above budget one year in one market, we might be down on budget in another market, sure. And they offset each other. So, but then again, I'm not that diversified because it's all Midwest. It'd be interesting if you asked that question to say, well, what do you think of California's economy versus Indiana? It's like, I would tell you that I think those are very, very difficult places to do business. I think California is just seeing a ton of flight. A lot of my clients have left there as a result of state income tax issues, policies that happen from the government at times, fires, et cetera. And I think we're immune from a lot of those things. I'd like us to be more focused on business, treasury, and balanced budgets than all the social issues that we have. I mean, I got a Mitch Daniels. I'm a bit of a sycophant for his policies and how he ran the government. I know you are too. I don't care if you're right wing or left wing. I'd like to see most of those things stay out of government, and I'd like government to focus on what it should focus on. And Indiana tries very, very well to do the economic side of it, et cetera. But I do think sometimes it can be an impediment to bringing business in if you're too restrictive or you're too liberal on the social policies. And I just wonder why it has to be so forefront in both state governments as well as the federal government.
So I want to turn back to running a big law firm. So Taft is not quite to $1 billion in revenue, but you're on your way there, and with 1,000 attorneys and part of the AmLaw 100. How has law, running a firm of that size, how has that changed? What does it take today to lead a firm of that size through the ups and downs in the markets and the economy and et cetera?
So I think leadership is really simpler than people want to make it. Leadership is about setting a vision, getting people behind it. And the biggest mistakes I see from leaders is when they get that part right, and then they try and do everything themselves. Okay, we just forgot what leadership is. Leadership is getting others to get behind your vision, and maybe it's a vision they helped create, and pulling together to get a mission accomplished. When I became managing partner, we were accused of, by most partners, and I think it was accurate, that there was 2 or 3 of us that made all the decisions. And one of the first things I changed was to say, it's going to take a village. It's going to take 75 of us to transform this law firm into the modern law firm. And it came from all walks of the firm. I mean, it was like from every market. And the senior staff took on a much more active role. The non-lawyers needed to be empowered to run the day-to-day of the law firm so that we could focus on strategic, directional things. And you needed to have a lot younger group of people at the table. First thing we did is I reduced the average age on all the committees by almost 15 years. I started having 30-some-year-old people on the executive committee, which is our board of directors. I came out and said, I want 50% of our leadership positions to be women. I want diverse people on every committee, and I want some of our leaders, the right ones in the right places, to have a seat at the table and be leaders in that group as well. So I think we have 68% of our executive committee today is female or racially, ethnically diverse people. So a lot of things changed there. Yeah. And it's just hearing the different viewpoints and having that village that helps you get it done. I don't think a big law firm today can be autocratic. I think the more you try and make it autocratic and efficient, you take away that entrepreneurial spirit. And you need to empower each of your markets to be able to make decisions with a fall forward mentality. So it's not failing that we're going to criticize. It's not learning from failing that we criticize. And so we say fall forward. If you have a failure, just fall forward so that the next time that's behind us and we're going on to the next thing. Because if you're taking risks, you'll have some failures. So I think it's all those things. It's empowering. It's creating a culture of inclusiveness. It's listening to people's views, but then making a decision. They actually don't really want to make the decision most of the times. They actually just want their view heard so the right decision gets made. And I think that's what leadership is. So I don't think it's that much harder. Actually, in some ways, it's easier to run a 1,000-lawyer firm than it was a 300-lawyer firm because I have all the resources now.
You just described some of your leadership style. Did you have mentors that helped you come to those ideas, or how did you come up with your leadership style?
I've often thought, who is my mentor? And then I realized it's not any one thing in any one person. There are some people, and I know you've had some great mentors, and you probably could point to 3 or 4 of them that just completely influenced your life. I could probably point to 20. And I've just taken a little piece that I've learned from all those different people, including people that work for me. So it's just weird. My definition of mentorship is a little different than most others. I'm not usually looking for that secret sauce of one mentor. I'm usually looking for, like, you learn your integrity. Where do you learn your integrity from? Well, I can tell you Jim Summer at Summer Barnard was as high of an integrity person as you'll ever meet. I just used to call him my law father, but it was mostly what I learned from him was integrity. And then you learn what not to do from some people, and you learn how to lead others and how to diffuse situations from a personality standpoint. And I mean, I learned from my senior staff that work for me. I always think, well, that was a clever way to diffuse that situation. And would I have handled it the same way? So I think mentorship is really sort of internal for me by observing what works and doesn't work for others. And it's just more of a learning process than it is any one person. But certainly I've had a lot of good influencers in my life, including my high school coaches and my high school music teacher and different people who've influenced different parts of me.
You mentioned earlier AI, and I'm curious from your perspective, how you believe AI could change, if at all, the practice of law or even law firms in general. What do you see AI's impact on law?
So first of all, I'm not a tech guy. I'm a business guy who understands where tech is going to be utilized as opposed to knowing the technical part of it. So just know that about me. I view AI, and I think, first of all, we've committed to AI through a client innovation office. We have an entire group that doesn't, I won't say they do nothing but one of their primary missions is to study new technologies, new innovations, et cetera. And of course, AI is at the forefront of all that today. And right now, AI, in my mind, is not ready for prime time when it comes to complete solutions. I find a lot of partial solutions where it's a product company and it's not fully tested, but it's not a complete solution yet. And, we see that in a technology cycle. Everything we've ever done, it evolves to that. I think AI is going to be a great technology tool. And the law firms that embrace it as a tool to help them deliver a more efficient, better solution for their clients will win. Those that fear it and fight it will get cannibalized. It's just that simple to me. And I think it's going to eliminate a lot of the mundane tasks that don't need to be done by human beings. I mean, how many times do you have to stamp out a document that says the same thing before you realize that a robot could do it? Or in this case, AI could do it. And then think about, through a computer algorithm, is there a more efficient way to get it done? Or are there words missing that shouldn't be there, et cetera? I mean, it's actually a really great tool. It'll never take away the high-end nuanced thinking of a human being. I think people just are paranoid about that, and they don't have a reason to be. I think it's also dangerous. Some early AI incidents have been where in the legal profession where somebody used OpenAI and it made up a case.
Supreme Court case.
And it made up an outcome. And it's like, you've got to be careful. You can't take the human being out of this, and you've got to remember what it's for. But again, we need to embrace it. I mean, I remember when email, people were so nervous about email, but email revolutionized the way we practice law.
And business, really.
Business, too. I mean, can you imagine without email today? And how about this? Imagine your life without Zoom today. When did Zoom revolutionize? COVID became the compelling reason that Zoom and Teams revolutionized how we do business. And everybody goes, oh, it's taken away all the human contact. I go, I completely disagree. From 1995 until 2020, when I would do a merger and acquisition deal, we would do email and then get out 800 numbers. I never met the other lawyers. There was times you'd get done with a deal, you couldn't remember their name. Today, I get on Zoom with them. We get to know each other. I feel like I'm together. I mean, so I view that those new technologies as critical to the future. And if you don't embrace them, you're going to get stuck in the past and get eliminated. I mean, I look at how many law firms are out there that used to be incredible law firms, and they let the changes pass them by, versus some that have, in the top 25 are the best examples of, they embraced the change and look at what it did for them. So you got to get your lessons where you get them.
So you have an interest outside of law, which is riding motorcycles. And I understand you take an annual trip. How did you get into motorcycles, and what was your most recent trip?
So I try to take an annual trip, and I'm into motorcycles only because it's my freedom. It's my chance to get away. It's not because I'm doing anything crazy on them. I use it just to tour beautiful parts of our country, and actually Canada so far. Maybe I'll do Europe at some point. I've probably taken a total of 8 or 10 big trips. Funny, I bought my first motorcycle when I was a first-year law student and taught myself to ride, and I've probably put 200,000 miles under my belt on motorcycles. My most recent trip was 3 weeks ago. I did a 5,400-mile trip by myself. I left Indianapolis. I went through upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, took a ferry over to Nova Scotia. Then I went up, did the coastline in Prince Edward Island, came down through New Brunswick, over through Quebec, and was almost 12 hours northeast of Montreal. And then I worked my way back. Stayed my last night in Lake Placid. And my favorite thing to say about that was I woke up in August, almost Labor Day. It was 48 degrees in Lake Placid. I had my long johns on and 2 or 3 coats. And by the time I got to Columbus, Ohio that evening on the way home to Indianapolis, it was 93 degrees. So wow. I thought that was a pretty big variation.
Yes.
That's what I like about the motorcycle. It's just a sense of freedom. But I'm not nutty on it or anything like some guys are, they race and they do that whole, that's not me. I've been to Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon and the Navajo Reservation and the Grand Canyon, the Mojave Desert, Wyoming, Yellowstone, Montana. It's just, I can picture every one of those places, and it's beautiful.
Neat hobby. Well, Bob, we've made it to Off the Record Speed Round, where I ask you a series of questions and you try to give me as succinct of an answer as you can. You can go on a little bit if you need to. So first one, favorite movie?
I think I would say Godfather 1 and 2 together. That to me is maybe an epitome. Apollo 13 gets close, Shawshank gets close, but I think Godfather 1 and 2.
Favorite place to vacation?
Funny, I've been to a lot of beautiful places and they're great. My favorite times, though, have been Destin, Florida, when I rent a beach house for the whole family and we just get together and hang out and do nothing else. So it's certainly not the most elaborate place, but it's my favorite times.
Favorite musical artist?
I'd have to say Billy Joel. Just throughout my life, I would say he's probably the most impactful artist I've seen.
What's the first thing you do in the morning?
I'll say the second thing because now I'm 63 years old.
Right.
I won't say the first thing. I get up and read. I mean, I'm a reader, and I'm either reading my phone and my emails, or I'm another chapter in the book or whatever, but I'm a reader.
Speaking of reading, what's the last book that you read?
The last one, I read probably 20 books a year, so I don't know if it's quite the last one, but it's the most impactful last one in the last 6 months. Ian Toll, who's a Naval Academy professor, wrote the Pacific War trilogy, which I thought was just unbelievable. They say truth is funnier or better than fiction sometimes. This reads like fiction, but the characters of the Pacific War with Nimitz and Roosevelt and everything, it's just fascinating. I know you like history too, but this is a great book. The trilogy, it's a long one, but it's great.
What food can you not live without?
Salad bars. I love them.
Best advice you ever received?
Never give up.
Pacers or Colts, or maybe I didn't even name your favorite team.
I would say both of those teams have equal footing with me, but those would be my favorite teams.
Bob, thank you so much for joining us on the Indiana 250 podcast. It's been great to hear your insights and exciting growth story of Taft, and look forward to seeing you continue to grow. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, and congratulations on all you've done here at the IBJ. I'd be remiss not to talk about how exciting that's been to see.
To learn more about other leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list, go to indiana250.com and look for a Page 2 feature each week in IBJ. We'll be back with the new Indiana 250 off-the-record conversation soon.